from youth burning tires in an effort to prevent Assad and Russian planes from targeting them. Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and on to Washington, D.C. On the website, thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. On the program today, the fight for Aleppo, a Jewish Voice for Peace video, and more about the Clean Energy Revolution weekend in Philadelphia, including an interview with a famous celebrity. As we record, people in Aleppo are getting a lift from youth burning tires in an effort to prevent Assad and Russian planes from targeting them. The last road into Aleppo has been cut, the siege is total, and bombing goes on day and night. The social media calls the burning tires the people's no-fly zones. The international community won't buck the Russia-US agreement, or should I call it conspiracy, to allow Assad to conquer all of Syria as the price of cooperation in a fight against ISIS. See this graphic. Instead of blowing bubbles, the child is blowing smoke from the burning tire. Of course, the smoke is poison in the long run, but these people reasonably guess all they have is the short run. For those of you who know a little history, Syria today is comparable to 1938 in Spain. Then and now, the popular forces seemed to be on their last legs, being destroyed by the fascists and their foreign supporters. Then Hitler and Mussolini, now Russia and Iran. There is a difference. Instead of the democratic forces getting left liberal support as they got in the 30s, almost all the left is now buying into the view that the Syrian people rose up against Assad in their tens of thousands because of a US or Israeli plot. So much of the left has turned its back on the Syrians. Conspiracism has replaced Marxism as the methodology of the left. This is photojournalist Mohammed Sayed Hassan. He was gravely injured in an airstrike in Syria a week ago. He expired on August 1st. Finally, some photos from a protest in Minneapolis. The folks were on 55th Street near the Russian Art Museum, which some consider an honorary Russian consulate. Someone from the museum came out to say that they had no connection to the Russian government and invited the protesters to visit the museum for free. Now from Jewish Voice for Peace, scenes of mistreatment of Palestinians in Nabi Saleh.
حياتي لو كان فيش احتلال بتكون أحلى بس برضو احنا كل يوم تقريبا نتعرض للعنف من الاحتلال وبصير فعالية كل يوم. اسمها باسم محمد التميمي بنت باسم النريمان التميمي. أنا من فلسطين بعيش بقرية النبي صالح. هم هناك بنت 14 سنة بتعيش حياتها بين أهلها بتخسرش حدا بس أنا كل حدا من عيلتي معرض للخطر وفي أي وقت بيجوا بيعتقلوه أو بيقتلوه.
دفاعا عن كرامتنا الإنسانية. ما تخافيش تعيطيش.
مرأة كبير وهي أساس المقاومة الشعبية وبلاها يعني بنخسر أشياء كثير يعني زي فلسطين وبالنبي صالح يعني المرأة بتتعرض للعنف زي الزلم بالضبط لأنه الاحتلال فيش عنده رحمة فيش عنده بنت ولا ولد ولا شيخ ولا مرة ولا أي حدا يعني بهمه. إصابة أمي أثرت يعني كثير يعني كانت أولها يعني كنا نفسيتنا صعبة وأثرت يعني على دراستي إني كنت أرجع لأنه هي كانت ما تقدرش تتحرك. بشوف المستقبل أحلى لأن دائما بتخيل إني راح أطلع الاحتلال من بلدي ومن وطني. راح إن شاء الله يعني إذا الاحتلال كان طالع إذا ما كانش طالع من فلسطين إن شاء الله بيطلع يعني رايح أصير محامية عشان إذا اعتقلوا حدا من عيلتي أو استشهد حدا من عيلتي يعني إن شاء الله ما بخسرش حدا من عيلتي راح يعني عشان ندافع عنه. وإذا كان الاحتلال طالع من وطني بحب أصير لاعب في كرة قدم. ويعني حلمي الأول اللي تحقق حلمي إن شاء الله تحرر فلسطين وحلمي الثاني إني أشوف اللاعب نماذج.
Some good news. Promoting Enduring Peace is an over 60-year-old organization best known today for its Gandhi Peace Award. It's been given over the years to Eleanor Roosevelt, Daniel Ellsberg, Cesar Chavez, Bill McKibben, Medea Benjamin, and many others. PEP has announced that it will be giving its award next to two people, Omar Barghouti and Ralph Nader. Barghouti is a key Palestinian leader of BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. Nader is an internationally known figure for his work on consumer protection and the promotion of civic action and opposition to militarism. Here in 2006, he talked about the then latest Israeli attack on Lebanon.
Israel is committing a major war crime against defenseless, innocent children, men and women, their homes, blowing up highways, bridges, milk factories, hitting hospitals, destroying wheat silos, blowing up bridges, highways. At the same time, it tells people to evacuate into the northern part of Lebanon from the southern part of Lebanon. So they are putting their families in vans and cars and fleeing north, and they find the bridges blown out or the highways blown out. And some of them get direct hits from the precision weaponry of the Israeli Air Force as they're fleeing north. And now they can't even recover their dead because the whole process of transportation networks have been so demolished. I think what's going on here is an amnesia of history. Hezbollah represents the Shiites, which are almost 2 million people in Lebanon. The Shiites are the downtrodden of Lebanon. And in 1982, where many of them live in the south, Israel invaded Lebanon, breaking a 11-month PLO Israel truce. And when they invaded, the Shiites were not hostile to Israel. They did not have the claims that the Palestinians did on land in the West Bank. And so the Shiites, to their astonishment, were very roughly treated by the Israeli invaders. And many Shiites lost their lives and were injured. and nobody defended the Shiites. The Lebanese army didn't defend them. And out of that rose Hezbollah.
Omar Barghouti spoke at Yale in 2013. This year, his travel document was non-renewed by the Israeli government. A campaign is underway to pressure the Israelis to renew it. Here are two short clips of the talk he gave at Yale.
I'll discuss a little bit campaigns in the US, and then I'll move to some challenges, and I'll end with that. In the US, there are several very effective campaigns launched, BDS campaigns launched. One of the earliest campaigns was by the anti-war movement Code Pink, which targeted one specific company, Ahava, which manufactures in a settlement in the occupied territories. So just to tell you that BDS is about creativity, context sensitivity, gradualness, and sustainability. Just the fact that people support the three demands in the BDS call, ending the occupation, ending apartheid, and the right of return, does not mean that they have to target every company out there that's violating any of those. There's no way to build a movement with such a broad target. We have to be strategic in picking the targets of that. But it's very refreshing to see so much divestment initiative going on. Now, one challenge that we always get, especially in the United States, I think it's less effective elsewhere, perhaps in Germany it's still effective, is the anti-Semitism charge that hits anyone who dares to criticize Israeli policies. Those of you who are following the Brooklyn College scary controversy that a Jewish American philosopher called Judith Butler and a Palestinian human rights activist, yours truly, are going to speak about BDS at Brooklyn College. Sacrilege, blasphemy, disaster. One assembly elected official in Brooklyn said this can be a beginning of a second Holocaust. Just imagine the vitriol, imagine the hate speech and the racism involved by such anti-Palestinian speakers. And they are anti-Palestinian speakers, let's be very clear about it. They were opposed by the New York Times editorial board, by Mayor Bloomberg, hardly supporters of Palestinian rights, I must add, who defended the right to academic freedom.
On August 2nd, the BDS movement announced that the Israeli government had temporarily restored Barghouti's right to travel. So international pressure is working to some extent. But your help is needed on this campaign. See PEP's website, pepeace.org. In our last show, we had video from the Clean Energy Revolution Summit in Philadelphia, from its workshop on climate and war. Here is more, the remarks of Code Pink's Medea Benjamin.
So, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you consider yourselves environmentalists? Just about everybody here. How many consider yourselves peace activists? So just about everybody here. That's not the way it is necessarily out there in the activist world. And unfortunately, we have allowed ourselves to be divided up by what kind of movement, which issue we think is the most important, and allowed ourselves to fight with each other over which is most important. Oh, you know, the most important is the climate, because if we continue on this path, there won't be a world to live in. Well, if somebody presses a button and there's a nuclear bomb, there won't be a world to live in. Oh, well, you know, if we keep the money in politics, we won't have a democracy to live in to help save the planet, and on and on and on. I hope we are moving beyond that. And I remember when some of us started to organize against the invasion of Iraq, we went out to our friends in the environmental community and said, join us in opposing the war in Iraq. And it was hard to get people to join in because they didn't see it as part of their movement. And we continue to this day to have a hard time sometimes reaching out to our friends in the environmental movement to say war and environment are so intimately involved. Just let's take a look at the Pentagon itself. The largest industrial polluter in the world by far is the Pentagon. I think that deserves booing, not clapping. 350 million barrels a day, just about. There are only 35 countries in the world that consume as much oil as our Pentagon consumes. And the irony, the very tragic irony of it, is most of it is being used to protect what? Our access to oil. And the access to oil tends to be in places like the Persian Gulf and the waterways. We would have never invaded Iraq if it hadn't been for oil. We wouldn't be such great friends with the extremist Saudi Arabia were it not for oil. Now, you know, there is a dangerous thing in this work, though, and some of us here are working now on the issue of Saudi Arabia and how do we break the ties, and people come up to us and say, see, you know, we have to produce more of the oil domestically so that we're not reliant on these Middle Eastern countries. And we say to them, no, the answer is sustainable, alternative, green sources of energy, not nuclear energy, not clean coal, in quotes, and certainly not the continued treadmill of fossil fuels. So if we have to find ways to merge these movements together, I think another argument that we have to talk to people about is what is it that our bloated Pentagon is protecting? Not just our access to oil, our access to markets, our access to cheap labor, our access to other kinds of resources. I just came back from Honduras where you saw the US military ramping up and US military aid ramping up to that country in the wake of a coup, which, by the way, they reminded us over and over again was supported by Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. And it opened up the country to all of these concessions for mining, concessions for putting dams in, access to resources, affects the poorest people in Honduras, the indigenous community, the ones most affected by it. And you see that the US military is right in there ensuring that US clothing companies have access to the cheap labor in the sweatshops there, that US mining companies have access to the mines, and you see it as this vicious circle. And one of the things we really promote in the rest of the world is our unhealthy lifestyle, our overconsumption, our consumption of crap. I mean, how many of you have traveled around the world and everywhere you go, so you see Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola, and it's so gross. These drinks that have nothing except bad nutritional value and taking poor people's money away. Our overconsumption of fast fried foods, that where you go around the world and now see things like Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's all over the place. So we are exporting a lifestyle that is unsustainable for the planet, and we are using our military as part of opening the wedge. You might have heard of Thomas Friedman's quote that is so apt that says, you can't have McDonald's without McDonnell Douglas. So as we move towards what are the solutions and how are we going to address these issues of both climate change and war, it seems to me we really have to look at how do we build our movements together? How do we convince each other that we are part of the same movement? How do we convince each other that we have to work together to cut our horrendously bloated Pentagon budget, because that is where the money is to take us into a world of clean energy. That is the only place where there are so many billions of dollars they can't even find them because they've never been able to pass an audit. So when we work together to say that the bloated Pentagon has to be cut because it's being used to invade other countries and occupy their countries, it's also to say it's to free up the funds so that we can use our money for things that are good for us. And when we talk about things that are good for us, let's recognize in our own country, it's the poorest, it's the people of color, it's the communities that have the least resources at their disposal that are the ones that are the hardest hit by the polluting industries, the hardest hit by climate change. And so we have to do a much better job in our movements to hook up with those communities to work together. We also we also have to look at where are we so wastefully spending our money in terms of foreign policies, like now way over $3 billion a year, it's going to be now $4 billion a year, that we were giving to the repressive government of Israel that is repressing the Palestinians. Let's take that money and give it to poor countries that need the money to address the climate crisis. There are so many ways that we could so better use our financial resources in this country to address those issues. And let's know that no matter what happens in November, no matter who gets into that White House, we are going to have somebody in there who is a hawk, who's going to push us into more wars. We're going to have somebody in there who is beholden to the 1%, and that's the 1% that means big oil, that's the 1% that means Wall Street, that's the 1% that continues to lead us down this path of destruction of our planet. So let's not get complacent, let's not give any honeymoon after November. Let's build these movements together and demand, no matter what party is in power, that it does our bidding, which is to save the beautiful planet we're living on. Thank you.
In the Q&A, a member of the audience raised the question of capitalism and the climate. It was James Cromwell, the famous actor known for his roles in Babe, the Pig, and I, Robot.
Discussion in the room is not talked about is capitalism. So we all live in a capitalist. We're in the first world. There's a second world and a third world. And they're mostly getting the rotten end of the sharp end of the stick. So we have strategies to address our how we address the political process. What are we going to do to address our addiction to this idea of the exploitation of human labor and human aspirations for the profit of a few? Because if we don't, none of this will change. The Defense Department will keep conquering in order to maintain the capitalist status quo, and we will have the same inequity in our wealth, and we will have the same oppression, and we will have the same pollution of the world that we live in, because that's what capitalism is. It's a pollution.
I interviewed Cromwell, and we discussed topics such as factory farming and fracking in New York. So you had some interesting comments about capitalism and this huge problem with climate. Maybe you could repeat it?
This discussion was about the global context of the environmental crisis and its relationship to our geopolitical agenda in the world, the maintenance of armies, the disruption in people's lives in order to service an economy that needs to grow and provide cheap labor and raw materials for the engines of manufacture. And I said, so the 900-pound gorilla in the room is capitalism. It is something that we exist in the way a fish exists in water. When you ask most environmentalists here, are you a vegan? And they say, no, why should I be? And you point out the relationship between what happens in the factory farm system and the production of methane and the use of water, the degradation of the environment. In other words, we don't make the connection between the environmental struggle and this climate crisis and what we do as individuals. Our consumption, we are consumers. So George Bush can say after 9/11, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it, just go out and shop. So it seems to me, I asked the question, why is this not addressed? How we would defeat capitalism, because it has to be defeated, it can't be modified. And it seemed to me, in a non-violent way, because I'm not interested in violent revolution, that the BDS movement, boycott, sanctions, and divestment, if people would take as an individual responsibility to pick an organization, McDonald's, and to boycott and sanction and divest from. I have divested from all fossil fuels in my portfolio. I'm still part of capitalism. I still have a portfolio. As my manager says, where else are you going to park it? Well, that's the problem. We have to figure out some way where we can actually put our money for the advancement of people. There will always be a return on money. That I don't consider that capitalism. I consider capitalism the exploitation of labor and the exploitation of raw materials, in other words, the earth, for the aggrandizement of a few people. And I think we could actually, as groups, because it will take a group, but it takes individuals to change their conception, to move off of their idea that they are only consumers and that they have no impact on the economic system that defines their life.
And there have been some people who have been talking about this term eco-socialism as a way of replacing it and not rushing to the communist system, which in its own way was pretty brutal to the environment.
Yeah, you're not going to go backwards, and you don't know when the paradigm shifts, you don't know what the paradigm is going to shift to. No one can tell you what the paradigm is going to shift to. The process is to be accurate in your analysis of where you are. That's Noam Chomsky. Looking at the problem as cogently and as critically as you possibly can, and speaking truth. For instance, in New York, we do not have a ban on fracking. We have a moratorium. That makes a lot of difference to people to realize that we have something in place. After all this effort of all these people, we have something in place that could be modified just like that. It could go away. The work was not done. There were deals made, and we as the public and we as the people of this earth and the creatures of this earth lost because of the lack of foresight that the people who put that ban in did not say, but you must ban the use of all fracked fuel as well. That's what we should have insisted on.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Finally, some video from the anti-fracking march in Philadelphia on the next day. 5,000 to 10,000 people took part in 95-degree weather. TPP equals betrayal. That's our program for today. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.